February 1942, Kola Bay. My log shows the anchor moved at 0047 after the lead line read shallow. My superiors wanted speed under blackout, but the numbers would not match the sheet. I watched the chain rise iced over and felt the ship's weight searching for mud. If I was wrong, we would not drift free, only weight, blocking the next hull behind us. February 1942, Kola Bay, the approaches to Murmansk. Polar night still presses long hours over the water. Ice it's in the dark plates along the edges of the channel. The port is under blackout. No shore lights, no friendly beacons, only dim, hooded signals when absolutely necessary. An inbound Allied convoy has reached the outer approaches. Its ships carry food, fuel, vehicles, and ammunition. They also carry the weight of a timetable. If arrival's slow, the queue grows offshore. And if the queue grows offshore, ships sit exposed in a predictable pattern. In these latitudes, exposure does not only mean weather. It means bombers, it means submarines waiting beyond the headlands, it means a harbour that must swallow ships quickly without showing itself. Murmansk cannot do that work without pilots. Soviet harbour pilots guide foreign masters through the last miles. They do it with charts, bearings, and local memory. They do it in narrow water where one wrong decision can leave a ship pinned. Not sunk, not burned, simply stuck. A grounded hull can close an approach for hours or days. In winter 1942, that is enough to undo weeks of risk at sea. On this night, the main anchor is one person, a Soviet harbour pilot assigned to the inbound column. He is a working specialist, not a headline figure. His duty is simple on paper. Board a ship at the pilot station, take her through the port approaches, place her at a safe anchorage or the berth, then return for the next one. His constraint is measurable. The window to move a ship through the outer anchorage and into position is short. There is limited manoeuvre room in the ice. The pilot boat cannot linger. The port authority wants a steady flow, one ship after another, and the darkness makes course errors expensive. The pilot carries a clipboard wrapped in oilcloth. Inside it are the working documents of his trade, a small-scale approach chart, a harbour plan, a sounding sheet copied from the last set of surveyed depths. On the chart, pencil marks show preferred tracks, angles taken from headlands, a line that represents safe water for deep draft ships. That line is based on numbers. In winter 1942, the numbers can be stale. The ship waiting for him is a British merchantman. Her master is responsible for everything that happens to her. He has run convoys before. He knows that pilotage does not transfer command. It adds local knowledge to a master's responsibility. He also knows that nothing in the Arctic is static. Ice can shift, silt can move, a bar can rise at the edge of an anchorage without anyone noticing. And in blackout, the sea does not advertise changes. The master's constraint is also measurable. His ship draws deep. She carries heavy cargo for the front. Her draft leaves little margin over shoal water. He can stop, he can back, but only within the space and time allowed. If he has to turn in the wrong place, he will not turn at all. The harbour pilot boards in cold spray, boots clatter on the ladder, and a brief exchange at the rail. Names, papers, the pilot's lamp kept shaded. The pilot steps to the bridge and looks out. Nothing is seen in the normal sense. The shoreline is a darker mass against a darker sky. The water ahead is a texture of black and dull grey. Ice pieces slide past like broken glass. The routine begins, compass checked, gyro compared, engine orders confirmed. The master's officer reads the course, the pilot gives small correction, the sounder, if it works, is watched with doubt. In cold water, with ice in the surface layer, echoes can lie. The pilot asks for the lead line to be made already. Not for drama, for procedure. The ship approaches the outer anchorage area. The port keeps ships here when inner berths are full. The anchorage should have room. It should have depth. The chart says it does. So that the sounding sheet supports it. The safe depth line on the chart sits a certain distance off the shore. On the paper it is clean and confident. The first sign of trouble is quiet. A depth figure does not agree with expectation. It is not a catastrophe reading. It is a few feet less than the sheet suggests. A single odd number might mean nothing, but the pilot has seen odd numbers stack up. He asks the officer to call the soundings in a steady voice. He listens for rhythm. He listens for change. A second reading follows. Again, slightly less. Then a third, not a dramatic drop. A small, persistent mismatch. The master watches the pilot's face. The pilot does not announce fear. He does not curse, he moves his pencil on the chart. He draws a small cross where the ship is estimated to be. He compares it to the safe line. And he checks the heading. He checks the set of the current as best as anyone can in darkness. There is no lighted buoy to confirm position. Any buoys that existed in summer may be buried in ice or removed. Ranges are invisible. The pilot relies on bearing cuts from shore shapes that cannot be trusted. He relies on time and engine revolutions, dead reckoning. It is sufficient until it is not. The pilot opens his sounding sheet. The figures are in columns, stations along the approach, depths in meters on the Soviet copy, fathoms on some of the foreign copies. That overlap is normal in Murmansk. It is also where misreadings are born. A copied sheet passed hand to hand, a conversion done in a hurry, a column that slips half a line when recopied, a smudged digit under cold fingers, and the deeper problem, even if the figures are read correctly. They may be old. On this sheet, one station is marked as safe water, a depth that should keep a deep draft ship off the bottom. The pilot's pencil pauses over the number. It reads as if it were written twice, a 4 that could be pillar 1, a tail that could be a correction. The pilot has seen this before, a clerk copying from an older book, a line of figures drifting upward, one row, a single station taking the depth of the next. On paper, the safe depth line stays in place. On the sea, the ship pays for the error. In winter, ice can push and scrape. It can shear bottom sediments in shallow places. It can also trap silt in eddies, building a ridge. A ridge does not need to be high to matter to a ship with little margin. The pilot asks for the lead line. A seaman goes to the chains. The line is weighted. The marks are checked by touch. In blackout, even the mark colours mean little. The seaman calls out the feel of the bottom when the lead touches. Sand, mud, gravel, sometimes nothing but a cold bounce. The first cast comes up with a depth that matches the worrying echo. The pilot does not yet change the plan. When the lead line confirms the shallow patch, the pilot makes the correction openly. He draws a single line through the printed figure on the working sheet. Beside it, he writes the new depth as measured, with units noted. He adds his initials. He adds the time of the cast. It is not a survey. It is a controlled observation made under escort conditions, but it is precise enough to justify a change in track for the next hour. He asks for another cast. The second cast agrees. The third is less by a small but meaningful amount. The pilot looks again at the chart. The ship is near the outer edge of the anchorage where the safe depth line curves. On paper, it is safe. In reality, the line may be wrong. The master asks, briefly, what is wrong? The pilot answers in practical terms. The depth is not as expected. The anchorage edge may be shoaler than the sheet. The ship must not commit further without confirmation. There is pressure even before anyone speaks it. Behind this ship, others wait. The convoy cannot bunch in the open. Naval control wants movement. The pilot station has its own schedule. If this ship delays, the sequence breaks. The pilot requests a slow ahead and a small alteration. He wants to test the water inboard of the planned track. If the depth increases, the ship is too far out. If it decreases, the shoal is broader. The master agrees. The ship creeps. The lead line continues. Numbers come in like a metronome. The depths do not improve quickly enough. They hold shallow for too long. The pilot's pencil begins to make new marks on the chart. Small notes beside the printed soundings, a corrected figure, a question mark, a short line showing where the safe line should perhaps be. These are not official changes. They are working notes made under risk. Yet they are the first step toward an official correction. In later paperwork, those pencil notes will matter. The pilot decides to stop the column from committing to the outer anchorage edge. He does not have authority over the convoy as a whole. He has authority on this ship as a pilot advisor. He can recommend. He can insist in the language of safety. The master, responsible for the ship, can act. The decision is to anchor sooner than planned and shift the anchoring position. Not dramatically, not in panic. A controlled move to hold the ship in safer water while the pilot confirms a revised approach track. The pilot orders the anchor to be walked out ready. The master orders engines to stop. The ship's head falls into the wind and current as best as the darkness allows. The lead line is cast again. The depth is spoken. The pilot picks a spot with slightly better numbers. He gives the word, anchor goes down, chain rattles. The ship's movement eases. In the logbook, the officer of the watch writes the time. The entry is plain, anchored, with position by estimate and bearing. Then a second line. Anchor moved will come later. The pilot is not satisfied. A ship at anchor can still be in danger. Ice can push her. And a change of wind can swing her towards a shoal water. If the depth line is wrong, she must be moved inward before more ships arrive. The pilot requests the engine room standby. He asks for a second anchor to be ready if needed. He asks the mate about the ship's draft. The master gives it. The pilot calculates margins in his head, quickly, repeatedly. He checks the sounding sheet again. One station number remains suspicious, not because it is impossible, because it sits where a copied sheet can hide an error. He checks the heading of the sheet. Date, area, signature line. It is not freshly made. It is not wrong by itself, but it might not match winter reality, and it might have been transcribed incorrectly. From the bridge, the pilot asks for the lead line to be used in a small pattern, not one cast, several, ahead, A-beam, and a little astern, a rough box of measurements around the ship. This is slow work. In a peacetime harbour it might be laughed at. In the Arctic under threat it is costly. But it is also the only way to know the truth under the keel. The calls come in. Some are better, some are worse. The worst are near the direction the convoy would naturally take if following the printed track. The shoal is not a single point. It is a shallow tongue reaching farther into the anchorage than the paper suggests. This is the moment the problem becomes more than one ship. If a deep draft merchantman grounds here, she will not slide off. Ice and mud will hold her. Tugs are scarce. A grounded ship at the Anchorage edge can block the approach track for the next arrivals. Then ships will stack up offshore. Then the convoy becomes a target while waiting. And the pilot decides on an anchor shift. He recommends lifting and re-anchoring closer to the inner side of the anchorage. He also begins to draw a revised approach track to share with the pilot station and the next ships. The master asks about the risk of moving in darkness. The pilot answers with comparison. Moving slowly with verified soundings is safer than staying near an unknown shoal. They will do it under control. They will use the lead line continuously. They will keep engines ready to check any swing. The signal lamp remains shaded. Communication is kept minimal. No extra light, no loud signals. Still, the port control officer on the radio wants progress. There are ships waiting. The pilot replies with a short phrase. Depth discrepancy, verifying, no argument, no lecture, only a reason that can be logged later. The anchor is raised. Ice clings to chain. Men beat it off with wooden mallets to avoid sparks. The ship nudges forward at slow speed. The lead line works without pause. The pilot counts seconds between casts. He watches the numbers like a man watching a fence line in fog. The depth improves by the small increments. A metre here, half a metre there. Enough to change risk. The pilot chooses a new spot. He calls for the anchor again. The second anchoring is cleaner. The ship settles with more water under her. The pilot checks swing room. He checks the distance to the printed safe line. He marks the new anchor position with a circle on the chart. Beside it he writes a time. It is the time that will later appear in the British logbook entry. A plain line that proves the decision happened when claimed. Behind them, and another merchantman creeps in, guided by another pilot. The pilot on this bridge knows that pilot. They will exchange information later. For now, the information must move through the proper channel. A pilot report, a sounding correction note, a message to the pilot station. This is how small fixes become institutional. But the night does not pause for paperwork. Wind rises, snow begins to move sideways, visibility shrinks. The anchored ship is safer, but the convoy outside is still arriving. The port's doctrine is built on throughput. Ships must arrive, anchor, unload and depart. Murmansk has limited cranes. It has limited shelter. It has limited time before the next raid. Pressure for speed can become pressure to accept risk. The harbour pilot feels that pressure. He hears it in clipped messages, and he sees it in the master's eyes when the radio crackles. He knows that if he cannot justify the delay with hard numbers, he will be blamed. So he builds evidence. He writes figures on the sounding sheet. Not just the depths, the times of casts, the approximate positions relative to the ship's head, a note about the line's marks being checked, a note about ice interference with the echo sounder. He is careful. He uses restrained language. Indicated depth less than sheet by approximately. He avoids claims he cannot prove. On the chart he draws the shoal tongue. He does it with a dashed line. He adds pencil figures at 2 points. He adds a short arrow showing the safer track inward. This chart will later be passed to a superior for copying. The original pencil notes will remain on the pilot's working copy. and that copy will become part of the report packet. Near midnight, the naval control officer insists that the next ships must be brought closer. The pilot replies that the approach track near the Anchorage edge is unsafe at current depths. He offers an alternative: bring ships in on the revised line, hold them slightly inboard. Keep their drafts and swing circles in mind. It is a small change, but it requires authority to accept. The turning point arrives not with a battle, but with a second confirmation. A second ship under a different pilot reports similar shallow readings near the same printed line. Independently, the evidence matches. Who sets it of soundings? 2 ships, 2 pilots. The printed line is wrong for winter conditions, or it was copied wrong. Either way, it cannot be used as is tonight. Now this is enough for the harbour pilot to act beyond his ship. He asks the master for permission to pass a message through the ship's radio to convoy control. The master agrees. The message is brief. It does not exaggerate. It says that soundings at the Anchorage edge show less depth than charted. It recommends a revised inboard track. It requests that incoming ships reduce speed and prepare for lead line verification. Somewhere offshore, a convoy escort will receive that message. Whether it is believed immediately depends on trust. Trust in pilots, trust in numbers, trust in the idea that a small shoal can be as dangerous as an enemy. The convoy continues to feed into the port approaches. It cannot stop entirely. It can only adjust. The harbour pilot stays on the British merchantman longer than planned. The pilot boat cannot safely take him off until the ship is stable and the approach track is clear. Time passes, cold deepens, the pilot's hands grow stiff. He keeps writing anyway, because the paper will outlast the night. At one point, ice pressure causes the ship to shear on her anchor. The master orders a small engine movement to relieve strain. The pilot watches the swing carefully. He checks the updated depth calls. The ship remains in safer water. The earlier position would likely have put her closer to the shoal tongue as she swung. It is a quiet confirmation that the shift mattered. As the hours move, authority arrives in the form of a port officer sent to question the delay. He comes by small craft, clambering aboard with a hood pulled tight. He is not an enemy. He represents the institution that must keep ships moving. And on the bridge, the harbour pilot shows him the sounding sheet. He points to the printed figures, then to the fresh pencil corrections. He points to the times. He points to the lead line method used. He shows the chart with the dashed shoal outline. He does not claim a full survey. He does not claim certainty beyond the casts. He claims only what can be supported. The port officer presses for speed. He mentions that the convoy is waiting. He mentions that daylight will bring air attack. He mentions that delays increase risk. All of that is true. The pilot answers with a different risk. If a ship grounds at the Anchorage edge, the port will lose days, not hours. The convoy will wait offshore anyway in worse conditions, with no shelter. The pilot's numbers are a risk reduction, not an obstacle. The officer reluctantly accepts the revised track for the next arrivals. He does not announce it as a victory for the pilot. He frames it as a temporary adjustment. That is how institutions protect themselves. A correction is accepted, but no one admits the chart was wrong. With the revised track, ships anchor in slightly different positions. The outer edge is avoided. The anchorage becomes tighter, more crowded. The master watches other ships swing and settle in the dark. He knows that a crowded anchorage has its own hazards, but it is better than a shoal tongue that can grab a hull. In the early morning hours, a ship with similar draft comes in on the revised line. The lead line reports adequate depth. The ship anchors without incident. In another world, it might have followed the printed line and touched bottom. And no one will ever know for sure, but the pilot's paperwork will carry the reasoned argument. The harbour pilot finally prepares to leave the British ship. Before he goes, he asks the master to make a clear log entry. Not for blame, for record. Time of anchor shift. Reason. Method of depth verification. The master agrees. The officer writes it in calm language. Due to discrepancy in charted soundings, anchor moved to inner position at a recorded time. This is the proof detail from the ship's side. It is not propaganda. It is administrative truth. The pilot returns to the pilot station with his documents. He hands the sounding sheet to the duty officer. He keeps his own copy. He hands over the chart with pencil notes. He explains the casts, the positions, the revised track. He speaks in the language of caution. To recommend amendment pending survey. Observed depths. Lead line used. He does not overreach. Day brings no relief. Aircraft can come, shelling can come, weather can change, but ships are now inside the port system. They are harder targets than they were offshore. Cranes begin to work. Trucks queue, Men move cargo without ceremony. The harbour pilot's work continues. He boards another ship that day. He uses the revised track again. He hears the same cautious question from another master. Is the chart reliable? He answers with what he has. There are corrected figures at the Anchorage edge. The printed safe line should not be trusted without verification in winter conditions. He speaks like a man who has watched paper drift away from reality. Over the following days, the pilot report is copied and filed. Superior adds his own signature. A clerk stamps it. The corrected figures are transferred from pencil to ink on a clean sheet. The harbour plan receives a small amendment note. Perhaps only on working copies, perhaps only at the pilot station. War does not leave time for perfect updates. No public mention is made. Convoy histories will record ships arriving. They will note storms, attacks, losses at sea. A depth discrepancy at the Anchorage edge will not appear. Yet it is precisely these small technical moments that keep a supply line alive. The British master finishes his own paperwork. He notes the pilot's competence. He notes the delay. He notes the reason. He does not write a dramatic account. He writes what a master must write. Time, position, action. Months later, another convoy will arrive. A different pilot will board a different ship. And some will use the corrected line. One will rely on memory. The shoal tongue may change again with ice and current. The lesson is not that one pilot saved a convoy. The lesson is that procedure mattered. Verification mattered. And a single misread sounding, if left unchallenged, could have trapped ships where enemy and weather could reach them. In winter 1942, Murmansk's outer anchorage was not only a place to wait, it was a narrow margin between arrival and failure. The harbour pilot and the merchant master did not win a battle. They prevented a preventable obstruction. They did it with a lead line, a cautious anchor shift, and pencil notes that could be checked. The paper trail remains the quiet proof, a sounding sheet with corrected figures, a chart with pencil marks showing an adjusted track, and a logbook entry with a time for the anchor move. If evidence-driven, overlook WW. Two details are worth preserving. Subscribe for more grounded convoy stories and share this episode with someone who values the work behind the headlines.